All right, welcome everybody. So glad to have you guys here. We last week I did a launch on setting up to crush your goals, and I saw a quote by a content producer, Sean Cannell's his name. I believe I'm pronouncing it right. He runs Think Media out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and he is an absolute beast with putting together content. But I saw on Instagram he had a post, and it said, "Reasons come before results." And if I had to encapsulate what the last training was about, is that your reasons come before your results. We talked about, what deathbed Troy would say to 30-year-old, 35-year-old, 45-year-old self. And that's really the question that, I'll kind of recap with you right now is what would 90-year-old Victor say to you right now? What would 90-year-old Jeff say, 90-year-old Tyler, 90-year-old Tanner? What would 90-year-old you say to yourself? And I positioned the question of, if you were 90 years old on your deathbed, what is something that you for sure would absolutely want to have done? Or what, if you were 90 years old and dying, what would be your biggest regret on your deathbed? And be intentional today about accomplishing that. And so it was a lot last week we covered in, and I'm not going to re-go over what we went over, but it does lay a baseline. So again, we put that video on YouTube. I'll put a link up in one of these corners, whatever corner it is. And you guys go back, watch that. It's really a foundational message to what we're covering today. It talks about how every single one of our goals are going to be spiritual, physical, financial, emotional, intellectual, relational, or recreational. And we talked about what types of goals that you could have in each one of those areas. We talked about how to identify where you want to go. What does the 90-year-old self want to accomplish? And then we can identify, hey, what do we need to start working on today? Some people are, really want to make sure you're married. Like, you want to say, hey, I have a family, I have kids. Well, that's awesome. But as time passes, we don't automatically get closer to our goals. We have to be intentional about growing to our goals, right? So we covered a lot of that foundational stuff last week. So this is going to build on it. If you feel like you're missing some items or having some questions, you definitely want to go back to last week and watch that video. Little hack. So whenever I'm listening to an audiobook or whenever I'm watching stuff on YouTube, I'm always going to the gear. I'm finding the playback speed, and I'm always 2xing the playback speed. Your brain is incredible. Your brain can comprehend so much information. It can pull in so much information way faster than what I'm able to speak. I think, I don't remember what it is, but there's like so many thousands of thoughts that people can have per second, or whatever the case is. Somebody can Google it. I would say fact check it, but we've recently found out under court of law that all of our fact checks we've been getting have just been opinions. So if you didn't see that article, feel free to Google Facebook fact checkers. And under oath in the court, Facebook had to admit that all of their fact checks were actually just opinions. So that wasn't really news to most of us, but for those of you living under a rock, welcome to Clown World 2021, where the people that are awake are not the people that are running the show, unfortunately. So cool. So hopping right back into goals today, we'll get off that soapbox right now. So we covered all that. It was an awesome foundation. If you haven't seen it, go back and see it. So today, we're kind of breaking this into three parts. Why, goal, plan. Your why is your fuel, reasons before results, right? So why, and today we're really going to be talking about goals. So today's going to be super, 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 super practical, as is the next one that we do, which won't be next Thursday. It'll actually be the Thursday right before the new year. I figured next week we have Christmas coming up and people might be busy running around. So we'll kind of delay a week, give people an opportunity to watch these videos again, and then go into the final year. And we're going to be doing a bunch of this stuff. So I really hope that you like this. If you're watching it on YouTube, definitely like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, throw a comment in to let us know what you really resonated most within the series or within this topic today. And that way it can help me and kind of guide me to see where you guys are getting the most feedback. So why, goal, plan. Today is the goal. So we're really going to be talking about what are effective goals, how to make effective goals versus ineffective goals. There's definitely a good, better, best way. I mean, the reality is if you're setting a goal, it's better than not setting a goal at all. So there's no such thing really as a bad goal. It's just really like good, better, and best. A good way to set a goal, a better way to set a goal, and then the best way to set a goal. And I'm not saying that like, hey, this is the ultimate best. You have to do it this way. I'm just saying what I found for me, what has helped us grow the organizations that we've grown, what has helped me accomplish some of the things that I've accomplished in my life. What I found effective and learned through trial and error. I'm just going to share that with you. And really, in reality, a lot of it isn't stuff that I've made up. It's stuff that I've learned from people like Jim Rohn and John Hagee and John Maxwell and Andy Frisella and Ed Milet and all these other people that are in the space. I'm just grabbing information and then I'm assimilating it and putting it into practice and kind of eating the meat and spitting out the bones. So when we talk about goals, there's what I've kind of identified as, apart from the categories, right? We've talked about the categories: spiritual, physical, financial, emotional, intellectual, relational, recreational. If you need a recap on those, go to the last week's Zoom call or the YouTube. But now, once we're actually making the goals, when we're actually comes down to put pen in the paper, hey, what are we trying to accomplish? I found that we can kind of categorize them into two types of goals. So we'll go into the actual goal setting strategy in a second, but I want to identify that there's really two separate types of goals. Now, there's what I call benchmark goals and what I call habit goals or habitual goals. So a benchmark goal is going to be a very finite goal. It's going to be, I want to be a certain weight by a certain time, or I want to have a certain amount of money by a specific date, or I want to accomplish this very specific item by this specific time. Now, not everything really fits into a benchmark goal. I think a lot of times we're drawn to set benchmark goals. I set benchmark goals. I have benchmark goals. But I also believe that there's power in setting habitual goals. And habitual goals are going to create baseline habits in your lifestyle. For instance, what is a habitual goal that's going to set a baseline? Most people coming into the new year, their physical body, right? That physical realm, that fitness, that's going to be somewhere on their goal map. So setting up goals in those areas are going to look totally different for totally different people. Like you can get on and you can look at bodybuilders and they're going to have some mass goals, like where they want to grow mass. They're going to want biceps a certain size, thighs, etc. They're going to want body fat at very specific percentages. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're at that point. You're watching this right now and you're like, yeah, that's me. Great. We'll talk about that. Those are going to be more benchmark goals. But maybe you're like, if you're working with us at Brave Freight, or if you're in the logistics industry and you're a truck driver and you're an owner operator, you're out on the road, like, being able to get to a specific body mass percentage, might not be, or body mass index or fat percentage, it might not be like the main thing right now, right? Like the main thing might just be like, hey, I want to get a physical workout in 3 times a week for 30 minutes, right? And we'll cover more in detail how to set that up. But realizing that that's a habit goal, like that doesn't necessarily drive in itself. It might not specifically drive the result, but it's going to create a baseline in your life. So spiritual, that's another thing, because sometimes it's kind of hard to quantify, like, hey, I want to be 20 steps closer with God in the next 20 weeks. Like, how do you measure that? You can't measure 20 steps with God. That's not how a relationship with God works. So it really just comes down to like that habit of, I want to spend 20 minutes in the Word of God every day, or I want to pray for 15 minutes every morning, or meditate in the Word for 15 minutes every morning. Whatever it is, it's about creating a baseline habit. It might be, if you want to build a stronger relationship with your spouse, it might be setting aside 15 minutes a day for 3 or 4 days a week, or 5 days a week, or 7 days a week, where you sit down and you just decompress with your spouse. honey, how was your day? Talk to me a little bit about what are some of your goals? What are some dreams? What are you working on right now? Like, these are our habitual goals, and they're very important because they create baselines in your life that help kind of ride a standard for you. We have other benchmark goals. Again, we'll cover those in a little bit, but I think a lot of us can benefit by looking at our life from these baseline goals or these habit goals, spiritually, physically, financially. Again, a baseline goal could just say, hey, I want to spend X amount of dollars every single week or less. And it might not be a savings goal, it might be a spendings goal. Hey, I want to limit my Amazon purchasing to less than $200 a month. Or, hey, I want to operate within a budget and I want to hit my budget for every single week or every single month. These habit goals, habitual goals, these are the behavioral goals that'll actually build and help you slam the benchmark goals at a later point in life. So I want to define, I want to kind of create the definition between those two types of goals, because one's not better than the other. They're actually both very important. You can't always have these major benchmark goals in all 7 areas running all of the time. You really need to take it a moment to really, we talked last week about thinking about that deathbed John, right? I'm just going to say deathbed John. Fill your name in where John is, right? But deathbed John, when you really look at deathbed John, there's certain things that are going to have to happen on a regular and consistent basis to help you have a fully content deathbed John. So we cover those, we kind of separate those 2 areas as far as benchmark goals and habit goals. If you have some questions about that, feel free to ping them in the chat. I'll spend a couple minutes at the end of this and we'll go through some of those questions and write them down now, like while we're talking. Obviously, if you're driving an 80,000 pound vehicle, please probably don't text them right now. Just hopefully you can get that in your memory bank and we can ask them later. But if you're sitting down and eating lunch, I know Jeff said he was just getting a patty melt right now. So write it down in the chat. We'll rip to it at the end. And that goes through the whole way through. I figured out a way on my phone to be able to get them. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, throw the question in the chat. I get, at this point in time, we don't have 10 million subscribers. So if we throw a notification there, you put a comment, I get a notification, I'll respond to it and, and get back to you and give you some insight on it. So habit goals, benchmark goals, I kind of want to define the 2 of those. Now, some other tips in setting goals, and we have a framework that we're getting out, but I feel like we have to get some tips out there first, or else if not, you're going to be so overwhelmed when it comes to the framework. So another tip is don't set goals in all 7 of your areas at one time. As a driven person, the goal is, no, I want to change every area. I want to change physically, financially, emotionally, intellectually, relationally, recreationally. I want to change in all of these areas. Yeah, okay, great. But you can't change in all of these areas at once. It's just going to cause too much shock to your system. There's a term called JMD, just manageable difficulty. I know I was talking to Matt, one of our team coordinators, Matt Wood, when we first promoted him, like, he was getting stretched. If you ever, I went to Bible school at the river at Tampa Bay. And, if you ever serve in any ministry that's moving the needle at any capacity, like, you'll hear that term, I'm getting stretched, right? And there definitely is a difference between I'm getting stretched versus I'm about to snap, right? Like, we want to make sure we don't get to that point, but you really want to operate into this just manageable difficulty. It's just like if you're working out, they talk about working out to failure. You want to push your muscles just to that point of failure. You don't want to go crazy beyond, because then you can cause some permanent damage and really hurt yourself. But you really want to operate in that JMD, that just manageable difficulty zone, because that's what's really going to help you push your boundaries. It's going to help you stretch that band, but we want to do it in a healthy and cognizant way. So as you're setting goals and you're thinking about the 7 areas that you're setting goals for and how you're setting up those goals, I'm going to encourage you to focus on, if you're just really digging your teeth into setting goals, I'm going to tell you to focus on no more than 2 areas at one time. And don't worry, we're going to go do goals totally different. We're not going to do New Year's resolutions. We're going to do it a totally different way. So you're going to be like, man, if all I do is focus on 2 goals at a time, I'm not going to get anywhere. No, I promise you that you will. Okay. Chill for just a second. We'll get there. But I want to just reel back a little bit, because if I've seen in my own life and I've seen in other people, we get very audacious about these goals that we want to set. And then all of a sudden we create a lifestyle that's just not something that we can maintain. We've all seen it. We've all been there. And again, the gym is like it's like the go-to mock of the new year. It's like, hey, the gym is busy for 2 or 3 weeks and then it all dies out. Why? Because people have these audacious goals of getting there at 5 o'clock in the morning and working out for an hour and a half, when the reality is they've been sleeping until 7:30 for the last 5 years of their life. And they think they're just going to shock their system into this new lifestyle. And for some people, it has worked. I'm not saying that if the why is big enough, if the reason is big enough, the results will come from it. And some people can do that. But the reality is most people are not changing their life in these big gaps, in these big leaps. It's step by step, inch by inch, it's a cinch, as the saying goes. Yard by yard, it's hard, but inch by inch, it's a cinch. So, and again, we still will make significant progress over a period of time, even with only focusing on a couple areas. So don't overwhelm yourself. You might be like me, super driven. You might be able to be like, man, I can take over the world. Cool. You may be able to do that, but do you have enough self-control to just pick 2? I think that's a skill, right? Like if you're a driven person, you might be like, screw this guy, I can do 7. Look, okay, macho man, macho woman, whatever you want to say, you might be able to, but let me challenge you with this. Do you have enough discipline to dial it back? Do you have enough discipline to chill yourself out for just a minute and really focus on 2 areas? Because that hyper focus in just a couple areas is really going to make a bigger difference in how well-rounded that you are in really accomplishing those goals. And instead of just going, a half a step forward over the next few weeks, you might be able to make massive progress in just those 2 areas. So that's the other thing that I'm going to say is we talked about habit goals versus benchmark goals. And now I'm talking about in those 7 areas, I really only want you to pick 1. If you're new at goal setting, pick 1 or maybe 2. If you're a pro, you're watching this, you've been setting goals, I would say, hey, 3 at max. But even at that, I wouldn't say setting 3 major benchmark goals, maybe like 2 habit goals and maybe 1 benchmark goal. And what you'll find is that the goals that become the goals that are habit goals now, you can actually make benchmark goals at other periods of time. If you don't have a regular discipline of reading your Bible, let's just say, because I know a lot of people want to grow their walk with God. If you don't have a daily discipline of reading the Bible, don't commit to read the Bible in the next 90 days. Maybe don't even commit to reading your Bible all of next year. If you don't have a daily discipline of reading the Word of God, start out with setting a daily discipline of 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day reading the Word of God. If you are say, hey, I really need to pray more and learn how to pray more, like you might not pray at all, right? Don't set a goal of I'm going to pray an hour a day. Set yourself a goal of I'm going to pray for 5 minutes every single day. And you're like, well, that's not really that much praying, Troy. No, it's not. But what's more powerful is you creating a daily discipline that you'll be able to take to deathbed John, right? So do it manageable, focus small, and you're going to see inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's hard. So I feel like those are some preliminary, tips, hacks, if you will. I hate using that word hacks, but those are some preliminary tips that I would say in setting goals to be able to position you for this next wireframe that I'm gonna set out for you. So a lot of people, when it comes to setting goals, are setting goals in a manner that it's very hard to create traction. It's very hard to create definitive growth off of. How do you know you've been doing that? Man, I've been doing this for a while and I don't feel like I've seen any results. I've been putting effort at this at learning this skill, and I don't feel like I've seen any definite results. I've been swinging a golf club for the last 7 months, and I don't feel like I've seen any results. Right? So that's usually when you're not seeing results, but you feel like you're spending time at something. That is generally because you're missing some of this framework that I'm about to cover with you. So often, I was just talking to my wife about this. So often people are like, man, I'm spending time doing this. I'm spending time doing that. And yeah, they might be spending time doing this and they might be spending time doing that. Like, for instance, with your finances, most people, right? Like, if you looked at your finances, if I said, hey, how much do you think you spend here every month? How much do you think you spend here every month? And we started going through Walmart and Amazon and Target and Love's and TA. And we started going through the truck stop expenses, the gas station expenses. And we started going through the coffee expenses and all these ancillary expenses. And I asked you, hey, what do you think? You'd give me a number. 85% of the time, if not over 90% of the time, if we pulled your bank records and we actually went through every single one of those areas and categories that I just asked you about, your guesstimate at what it is always under what actually happens. And it's just the nature of humans. We just don't really, it's hard to really comprehend all of these little elements, all these little add-ons, right? So that brings me to the point that I want to make, this framework for setting a goal, right? Next Zoom lesson, which is going to be the last Thursday of the month, we're going to skip next Thursday, we'll do the Thursday after that. But the framework for that is going to actually be setting the plan to the goal. But first comes setting the goal. You have to set the goal, right? Just going to check my phone here, make sure everything is looking good. Okay. So before we actually go with making the plan, we need to set the proper goal or the most effective goal to be able to set the plan to, right? Like if you have a goal and it's just not really an effective goal, or there's a lot of loosey-goosey in the goal, like the plan it's already kind of destined to not get you the best results as possible. So the next event that we do in 2 Thursdays from now, if you're watching this live on Zoom, we're going to actually cover the framework for making the plan. But for this week, we're going to now cover the framework of how to set a proper goal. So I'm going to use the acronym SMART, S-M-A-R-T. We're going to set SMART goals. There's a lot of information out there. You could Google search SMART goals, SMART goal templates. This is not something that I've made up. This is something that is very effective, and I've seen it work really well. So we're going to stick with it. SMART, S is specific. I kind of ride my team on specificity all the time. Like I get requests, hey, so-and-so needs a new settlement, or hey, so-and-so had an error in their settlement, or hey, can you help me out with such and such? And I'm like, yeah, but what week do you need a settlement report for? Oh, it's missing the payment on a load. Well, what load is missing from the settlement report? Or there's a charge, the pay is wrong. Okay, well, what about it, right? Like I need some specificity. There needs to be specificity. Or it's like, hey, we should do an event. Yeah, what event? When? There needs to be specificity in goals. If you don't have specific goals laid out, I mean, I'm talking about specific goals. I mean, I'm not saying how many breaths that you need to take while you're doing it, but they need to be specific enough that you can clearly define when you've hit the goal and when you've not hit the goal. For instance, saying something like, man, I want to get in better shape doesn't work, right? It's not going to be it because, better shape to somebody, you might find a girl that's into dad bods, right? Like personally for me, that's not my goal. Like I'm not trying to have a dad bod, right? So better shape to one person is different than a better shape to somebody else. It's got to be specific. Hey, I'm looking to be 195 pounds, right? That's a specific goal, which brings me to the M, S-M. M is for measurable. it needs to be a measurable goal, right? So now let me go through all of the acronym, and then I'm going to go through some examples of goals, because we're going to tie this SMART acronym into benchmark goals as well as habit goals. So we have specific, measurable, A is attainable, R is relative, and T is time sensitive. So attainable, again, back to this concept of just manageable difficulty. People will be like, oh, set your goals for like way out there. You never know what you're going to accomplish. And yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Like when we're talking about deathbed John goals, absolutely. Like be big-minded, like I want to own multifamily housing. I'm talking about hundreds of luxury apartment units, right? I'm talking about generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year, right? If I set that as a goal for me to do within the next 30, 60, 90 days, or even by the end of this year, is it possible? Like, look, anything's possible. Like it's definitely on Deathbed Troy's list, but that's not going to be like the immediate goal. And like if I don't own one 4-door multifamily complex, I'm probably not going to set a goal to reach 100 this year. Like maybe my goal is this year is like, hey, I want to own one multifamily, multifamily housing unit. I want to own 4 doors. I want to own 8 doors, or whatever the case is. That would be a little bit more attainable as far as setting that goal, right? Like if you're 330 pounds, like, maybe getting to be 190 pounds is not realistic. That's not an attainable goal, right? So that's what I mean by it. It's not trying to sell yourself short. I'm not talking about Deathbed John. I'm talking about what are you looking to accomplish by the end of this year. So that's attainable. R is relative. So this all comes back down again to Deathbed John. Like if you are saying like, man, I really want to, I'm going to set a goal to travel to 2 different countries this year. Like, okay, cool. But is that relative to Deathbed John's goals in life? Like, is that really relative to what your biggest, and if Deathbed John says like, look, my goal is to visit every country, or every continent in the every continent in the United States, every continent in the world, well then yeah, absolutely. Then that is relative to what your goal is, what Deathbed John's goals are. But if travel is not one of your main focuses for Deathbed John, then I'm curious as to if that goal is actually really relative to what you're looking to do. And I think that relativity, that kind of miffs people sometimes. They don't really think about that. And relativity is essential, but you need to do the step we talked about the previous week on the other, on our last Zoom on setting up to be able to crush your goals. Watch that video if you haven't, but that's where Deathbed John becomes really important, or Deathbed Jane. I'll go back and forth just so we hit both genders. Is Deathbed John, Deathbed Jane is, that's what determines the relativity of your goals, right? So if you're like having a hard time conceptualizing, what do I mean by R is relative, go back to setting up to crush your goals. Watch that on our YouTube channel, and I think that'll put you in a better perspective what I mean by relative. And then T is time sensitive. There has to be a time component. I am huge. I am so huge on setting time restraints on items. When I work with my team, again, I don't tell people you must have this by such and such date. I mean, it's rare that I do that. 99% of the time, I'm going to my team and I'm saying, hey, this is what needs to get done. This is specific, measurable, attainable relative to what we're looking to do. Now, it needs to get done by when? Well, that's up to you, John. Ryan, when's good for you? When do you think is realistic? Like, You know your schedule. I'm not a micromanager. Most people on my team, I train our team to not be micromanagers. I have a 5-year-old at this time, a 3-year-old at this time, and I have a 9-month-old. The last thing I want is to have another 5-year-old to micromanage. It's just not what I'm trying to do, right? So I always ask my team, hey, Ryan, this is what needs to get done, right? We've talked about it. You understand what needs to get done. You kind of have an idea of how long it's going to take to do that. When can you have it done by? And I let my team set the goals with me. I let them set the time element with me, because they know what they have going on in their life and what they have going on with work and all their other responsibilities. But there has to be a time element to it. So that's SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relative, time sensitive. Now, I'm going to bring that back in with benchmark and habitual goals, because you can have, we're going to go with physical again, just because a lot of people are setting, I mean, physical and financial are probably, like, I would say physical, financial, spiritual are probably like the top 3 goal categories for most people to start out with. And so to tie it in with like physical, if you're a truck driver and you want to lose some weight, you want to get into better shape, like setting a goal to lose 20 pounds in the next, 6 months, if you don't have any habits that are going to bring you to that direction, I'm going to say, hey, that's a good desire, but let's maybe not start with a benchmark goal. What I'm going to say to you instead is, hey, why don't we set a goal to do 30 minutes of cardio workout or hit high intensity interval training workout? Why don't we just set a goal of 30 minutes of high intensity interval training on 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? Okay, is that a SMART goal, right? Like let's now apply that wireframe of a SMART goal to this habitual goal. It's not a benchmark. This is a habitual goal. Is it specific? 30 minutes of high intensity interval trainings on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That seems pretty specific. Could I go into more detail as far as like what the actual workout plan is going to be? I don't think that's appropriate for this part of setting the goal. I think that'll come in at a later point, but we don't need to do that right now. I think we're pretty specific. Is it measurable? Well, yeah, it's 30 minutes and we're doing it on a Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday. At the end of Monday, am I able to measure whether I've done that or not? Yep, I can measure whether I've done that or not. Okay, so it's specific, it's measurable. Now, is it attainable? 30 minutes as a truck driver. I'm not a truck driver. We've been around them a lot. I haven't driven truck over the road before. So you guys have a whole skill set that I don't know, right? You probably haven't managed millions of lines of data before, like me. So there's a break of action there. But could you set aside 30 minutes? I think if the reasons are big enough, I think you can, right? Like whether it's at a shipper, whether it's at a receiver, whether it's at a truck stop, are there's going to be some workarounds, or there's going to be some challenges that are there? Like, look, if it was that easy to accomplish all the goals, like everybody would accomplish all the goals all the time, right? Like there's always going to be levels of challenges, but do I think that it's attainable? 30 minutes a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, high interval training workout? Yep, I think it's attainable. Is it relative? Well, look, this is going to have to be independent on each person. Like, is Deathbed Jane, is health something that's important to Deathbed Jane? Like, is her physical fitness important to Deathbed Jane? That's only a question that individual is going to be able to respond. I'm going to say for most people watching this right now that having some level of physical fitness in your life is probably important to you, whether it's because you want to be able to pick up your grandkids, or whether it's because you want to be active in a casual sport, if it's because you want to feel fit and healthy about your appearance and your life. I'm going to say it's probably relative to most people, but at the end of the day, as you're setting your goals, your relativity is going to be in that perspective of Deathbed John, Deathbed Jane. So consider that. So can I determine the relativity of this goal? No, I can't in this specific example. Is it time sensitive? meaning is it bound by time? 30 minutes a day. Okay, so that's time, and it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that's time. So yeah, so it's time sensitive. So we've now just used this smart wireframe to help us set a habitual goal. So that's how we're using specific, measurable, attainable, relative, time sensitive. That's how we're using the smart wireframe to a habitual goal. It could be financial, like I said, with a budget, could be relational. I want to spend X amount of time with my spouse or with my girlfriend or with my boyfriend or with my kids or with my grandkids. I want to have a 15-minute phone call, whatever the case is. All of those elements can go with a habit goal. Now, let's touch a little bit on a benchmark goal. A benchmark goal could very realistically be, I want to save $10,000 by July 1st, right? 6 months. I want to save $10,000 by July 1st. Okay, is that specific? Yes, it's $10,000. That's a fine. It's not, I want to get better at finances. It's not, I want to have more money. It's, I want $10,000 by July 1st. That is specific. Is it measurable? Absolutely. $9,999.99 is not $10,000, right? It is finite. It is a measurable goal, right? Specific, measurable. Is it attainable, right? If you're a truck driver, absolutely. We have 26 weeks. If you did the math on it, you can figure out saving roughly, what is that? $430-ish a week, give or take, right? Is that realistic, or is that attainable? I think that's attainable. I think that you can do it. That most of you guys that are out there, especially with the way that the market is right now, saving $400 a week, $420 a week is definitely attainable. Is there going to be sacrifices? Is there going to be other elements that come into play and make it challenging? Absolutely. Again, that word attainable doesn't mean easy. It means just manageable difficulty, right? This is where that just manageable difficulty comes in, is it comes in this attainable category, like in this attainable portion of the wireframe. That's where we really go to think like, okay, is this attainable? Don't ask yourself, is this easy? Ask yourself, will I end up in a psych ward by trying to hit this goal? If the answer is maybe, then it's probably just on the side of not manageable. But if the answer is like, probably not, then I'd say, all right, that's just manageable difficulty, right? Like you need to have that level of challenge, of just manageable difficulty, right? To be able to push yourself. Is it attainable? Yes. So now, is it relative? That depends, right? Again, I think for most people, saving money, financial goals, that's going to be something that's relative to deathbed Jane. Like I think that advancing financially, for most people, not all people, like you can absolutely have people in other parts of the world, in other parts of the country, in other professions that actually really it has nothing to do with money. Like that is not a goal to them at all whatsoever, right? And that's totally fine. I think for most people, it's going to be relative. But that's up to each individual. And then, is it time sensitive? Yes, we said July 1st. So that is a finite date. We're going to be able to measure the progress, our success or failure based off that date. So those are the wireframes for SMART. Just going to check to make sure we're not having any technical difficulties. But so that's basically where we're at, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relative, time sensitive, all to benchmark goals and all to habitual goals. Now, to kind of wrap this up, and then we'll do some questions here, is just checking here, make sure my chats everything's going good. Take a quick break. Okay. Now it comes down to really like setting a plan. I'm going to leave it with this, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. Is don't make a New Year's resolution. Most people don't accomplish their New Year's resolution. Overwhelming majority. I know, newsflash, right? Hard to imagine. But most people, they don't accomplish their New Year's resolution, and there's generally a few reasons why. But some of the big reasons why people don't accomplish their New Year's resolution is because they have too much time. The goals are just 52 weeks is a long time. 365 days is too much time to try to accomplish the goal. So before we go into the planning session in the last session, which is really going to make the nuts and bolts of this, I'm going to strongly suggest that you set quarterly goals, which is 13 weeks. I really want to, something that I found for me is that companies have quarterly valuations, right? They're quarterly reports. There's like the stock market has quarterly meetings. They have quarterly updates, quarterly releases. I'm forgetting the term right now that the stock market uses, but there's quarterly evaluations, right? And the reason why is because 13 weeks is a significant enough period of time to make some solid progress. But it's not so much time that you can procrastinate on your goals. If you set a goal to accomplish by March 31st, right? 31 days in March, I don't know, whatever, before April 1st. If you set a goal to accomplish before April 1st, you only have 13 weeks to accomplish it. You only have 13 Fridays, 13 Saturdays, 13 Sundays, 13 Monday through Thursdays. You only have 13 weeks to be able to accomplish that goal. The other reason why I like setting quarterly goals is that it allows you to set baseline habits. Like if you need to create the habit of working out 3 days a week, you can create that as a baseline goal. And over 13 weeks, you can solidify that in your life so that when we go into quarter two, that you may be able to be more on an autopilot on that, and you can now build on top of that lifestyle. You got to understand is that when we say 1, 2, maybe 3 of these goals a quarter, it's not like they disappear in the next quarter. It's that they get built upon, that these goals, these habit goals actually become the foundations for a new lifestyle that you're now creating for yourself. So by setting 13-week goals, it allows you to be able to build upon habit goals. The other reason I like 13-week goals is that it allows you to stay committed to a goal for a long enough period of time to just push through the suck, because like anything is going to suck when you're in just manageable difficulty. So you have to push through the suck. But the reality is maybe you set a goal and a plan that was really too tough to manage. And you don't really know, because again, it's going to suck for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Like it's going to suck, but maybe it's not really manageable. But you're not going to really know that at first. Like it's going to feel not, and then all of a sudden it's going to feel not manageable. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, cool. I got breakthrough in this, right? Or you could get to week 12 or week 13 and be like, yo, that was not manageable. I barely kept my mouth above water. Okay, well, at 13 weeks, it allows you that opportunity to be able to refresh your goals and to be able to re-engage. But you need to be able to lock in for a specific period of time, because you don't really know what that boundary is of like, did I do too much? Or am I just in this area of just manageable difficulty and I really need to be able to get the breakthrough, right? So 13 weeks is a short enough period of time to get significant results. It allows us to be able to focus on, 8 to 12 major areas every single year to be able to grow in our life. And it also gives us time to be able to reevaluate our growth at the end of that 13 weeks and kind of reassess where we're going. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up with there. That's epic. You guys are awesome. So if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and throw questions in the comments. If you're watching live now on Zoom, feel free to throw some questions in the chat, and I'll see if I can see some hands pop up here if you have any questions regarding what we're talking about. So you can unmute yourself if you have a question. I think there's a way for you to even be able to raise your hand. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and post the questions in the comment. If you're in our chat, we'll go ahead and open up some time. We'll open up some time now for questions. So feel free to unmute yourself if you do, or throw a comment in the chat. Don't be shy, because if not, I'm just going to go ahead and shut this thing down. No one's got time to waste. Oh, pop up here, chat. Smart again, for sure. Specific, measurable, attainable, relative, time sensitive. That was a question by Matt Wood. Specific, measurable, attainable, relative, time specific, time locked. Specific, measurable. Yep. So specific, it just needs to be able to be clearly defined, right? So like if you're setting yourself a goal, it just needs to be specific. Not, I just want to get in better shape. I want to save more money. I want to have a better life, right? That's not specific. It needs to be something specific. How do you know it's specific? Is because it's it's measurable. I want to be at a certain weight. I want to have a certain amount of money. I want to have a wife. I want to have a certain amount of kids. I want to have this measurable item for those children, right? That's measurable. Attainable, meaning that like, yeah, this is in the realm of I can attain this. Like this isn't something that's a total pie in the sky goal. Like those are good for deathbed John goals, deathbed Jane goals. But when we're setting quarterly goals, we want to be able to put them in a just manageable difficulty realm. So that's attainable. R is relative, which is, again, does this fall within the realm of deathbed Jane, deathbed John? Is this relative to what I want to be able to say on my deathbed? Again, the concept being is, man, I live my life. What is the biggest regret that I do not want to have on my deathbed? What would make me sick to my stomach to be able to say this? Like I was talking to my coach. I have like a life coach, if you will, who's kind of like a friend mentor. I guess you can call him a friend tour. But it's like, hey, what is that for me? It's like, hey, I want to live honorably with my wife and with my kids. Like that is something that, like, if I was on my deathbed, I would absolutely regret ruining my life with my family and my kids. Like that would be, and for people that have a strong spiritual life, like living for God is like making to heaven is not even a question. Like living for Jesus, like that's already a decision. Like the old man has passed away. I'm a new man. I'm alive in Christ. There's no two ways about it. Right? So that would be, relative. It would be that's how I would help define relative. And then T is just being time sensitive. Again, that it's locked into a specific time. So anybody else, any other questions, feel free to pop in.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yep, go ahead, Jeff. Speak loud. I got my speaker on the other side here.
Sorry. So when it comes to making specific goals, how specific do you want to make them? Like my goal is by Christmas to get my own truck.
By Christmas in a week and a half from now?
No, Christmas 2022.
Yeah, I think that's great. So good question, right? So this will bleed more into like the planning side of it, right? But I would definitely like go for year, make, model, right? Like I want to buy a 2017 Kenworth T680 with less than 500,000 miles on it by Christmas next year. Like that's basically how I would set that goal, something like that.
Okay.
Because that way it's going to help you when you're shopping for it, right? You know, what's my year, what's my make, or you could just say, hey, it's a pack car product. Maybe I want a Peterbilt or Kenworth, or maybe you don't care, right? Maybe I would just say some specific, like kind of look into that, like start to find that out, because what it'll end up being, you can set that goal for now, and then maybe what your goal is by the end of the first quarter is I want to have narrowed down the year, make, model of what my truck is that I want to get, like what engine I want in it, all that type of stuff, if that's important to you. So I guess it all just comes back down to relativity, right? Like it all just comes back down to like, what are you really going to be happy with at the end? So I don't mean to be ambiguous, but I guess I think it just kind of all depends on where your heart is at for your goal. Does that answer it at all?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
It's like, again, for anything, it's like, hey, how specific do I need to be? Like, do you need to say that you want to buy it from, ABC, like MCH Kenworth in Bentonville, Arkansas? Like, no, you probably don't need to be that specific with it, right? like you can have, you don't need to be that, so I was talking with a pastor the other day, and, he was talking about how they set up, a goal for the church was to have 7 campuses in the specific city. And then now what's end up happening is they're having multiple campuses, but they're not in that specific city. So maybe the goal shouldn't have been, hey, we want 7 churches in the specific city, but it's like, hey, we want to have 7 churches and we want to build a model that's scalable to multiple locations. Now it allows you to be able to be specific without putting yourself in a box.
Okay.
So and I think that's something that, like, there's not really like a 1+1 recipe for it. I think that I can kind of help you get in that direction, but there has to be a little bit of fluidity that's in there. Like, you could say, hey, maybe you don't know that you want a Kenworth T680, but you might say, hey, I want to be able to buy a truck that's $70,000, $60,000, $80,000, right? Like that, I would say there does need to be some specificity there. And you're just going to have to choose, like, okay, is that year, make, model? Is that price range? Is that mileage? Like, you're going to need to create some specifics there, but you're going to have to decide, like, what's hard and fast versus like what can be fluid. Any follow-up questions to that, Jeff? Looks like you muted yourself, maybe not. So
I have a question, Troy.
Yeah, go ahead, Victor.
So when I was a company driver, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time, and investing in drivers and stuff and doing this, because it's a blessing.
Cool, man. I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah.
So when I was a company driver for a year, I was a trainer, right? And I was working for a big company. Like in 2014, I was a trainer, and every month I would get a brand new driver that just fresh out of trucking school, right? And I would, it felt like I had to retrain it because most of them didn't even know how to shift back where every truck, had to shift and stuff. But I remember I trained about, in that year, I trained, like, I would say every month, a driver. So like that, 10 of them, 10 drivers in that year.
Sure.
So where I'm going with this is that I got to feel like which drivers, because these guys had no experience, right? So that's why they had to go with me for a month before they were,
right.
But the thing is, I could, after a while, I knew who would make it and who wouldn't, who would be like a really good driver. You know what I'm saying? I got a feel for that. And now, what I'm bringing this up is because that's what I want to do myself. But I was going to ask, because I know most companies like your company and most owner-op companies, they require drivers to have like a year, 2 years experience, right? I'm guessing it's insurance and stuff. But for me, like, I had an idea because I want to purchase more trucks, but I wanted to, because the good thing about me training the driver that had no experience, they didn't come with bad habits, right? So I could literally not only train them and know who was going to make it, because I was thinking doing it like different from the big companies. Like the big companies would hire them, right? And then they would take a test, whatever. But it would be sort of like an interview process, because I would pay them much better than the big companies, right? So it would be like, if you pass the month sort of interview with me as I'm training you, then you get hired. And because I can know from being in a month with a driver if he's gonna be a good driver or not. You know what I'm saying? But my question is, would you be willing to, like, if I already bought my first truck, it's paid off, right? But let's say I buy another truck, but I want to go, because I know when I got my CDL, I got it there in Roadmaster in Tampa, right?
Yep.
And I remember one of the weeks, all the big companies came and they made a presentation, to try to get us, right? I was thinking doing that, going there and getting like the top students and offering them, like what I want to do. Hey, I'm the owner, but I also want to train you. Like nobody does that.
I think I just had an idea, like, as we're talking, and the restriction is really the insurance companies that restrict, less me. Like, like, hey, if you're willing to train somebody and have them in the truck, I mean, that's your own life that you're taking in your hands, obviously. So I have to assume that you trust the person enough to drive that you're going to stay alive and it's your truck. So really those restrictions come from the insurance companies and not us at all. But like, yeah, so like one thing that you might consider doing even is like, hey, you bring that guy in for your truck for a month, and then maybe potentially, you do some team driving with them and vet them out. And maybe you even just sell them the truck as like a lease purchase, right? Or, you give them potential ownership opportunity in that truck, because I think a lot of people are like you. And that's what attracts so many owner operators to what we're doing here at Brave Freight, is that we want to help you grow your fleet with inside of our company. I mean, it's never really going to be mailbox money. There's companies out there that try to pitch like fully automated trucking companies. It just doesn't happen like that. There's always going to be a level of involvement from the owner or from the fleet owner. But, being able to do something like that here, like maybe even do like a lease purchase with them, in the long term, does it reduce the amount of trucks that you have? Potentially, but you're talking about somebody else purchasing a truck over 3-year, 4-year, 5-year period. If you could do that 4 or 5 times a year, I mean, it's still going to take you, you're going to have at some point, maybe 10 or 15 or 20 trucks on the road at any given time that are still cycling through a lease purchase program. And at that point, you might even realize like, hey, I actually don't want that many more trucks on the road. Like, I'm cool collecting 25 trucks at a time. And then, hey, you're building trainers to help train, and, you can kind of build a model like that in here. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. We definitely can talk about it, but I mean, something like that's totally possible.
Now, a question about the insurance though, because I figured,
Victor, I would love to talk to you. I would love to talk to you about this, but I just don't want to go too far in the weeds. So if you have questions around the goal setting, for sure, but if not, let's set up a time and let's go through like the specific trucking stuff for sure. And I don't mean to cut you off. I just also want to respect the other 9, 10, 15 people, 50 people that are watching on the YouTube channel. So definitely important. I'm with you. I'll actually call you right after this. I got to pack up here and I got another meeting. I'll call you on my ride to the other meeting. Do you have any goal specific questions for right now, or do you just want to chat in a little bit?
Yeah, my goal is to get 16 trucks and put driver and train them myself.
16 or 60?
Well, I'm gonna start with 16, but I want to purchase the truck. The goal is purchase the truck, train the driver, and grow and do that every whatever month.
That sounds good. Just set a time to it, right? It's specific, it's measurable.
Yeah.
It sounds attainable. It sounds relative, but just put a time to it, like by a certain date. And that sounds like a great goal, man, for sure.
I did it for since I can train a driver in 1 month, every 2 or 3 months, buy another truck and train another driver.
Yep.
Like that.
I think it's good, bro. I think it's really good. So, I mean, you're basically looking at doing that over the next 32 months. Yeah, that sounds good. 2.5 years.
Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah,
no, great, Victor. I'll call you too when I leave, when I'm on my way to the next meeting. Anybody else?
Appreciate it.
Quick pop in for questions.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yep. Love you, bro. Great questions. Cool. Doesn't look like it. We'll close down. If anybody, again, if you have questions, hop on the YouTube channel. We'll post it there. You guys are absolutely incredible. This year has been an amazing year. Next year is going to be over the top. If you haven't watched last week's video, I'll send a link to it in this video. Go back and watch it. But don't just listen to it. Don't just watch it. I really want you to set your own goals. Make them smart goals. Really consider, Deathbed John, what do you want your life to look like? And next meeting we do, we're going to help you set the specific plan to be able to crush those goals. So love you guys. You're awesome. God bless America. Ciao.